I am so excited for this video right now. Are you excited? Get excited. I think I need a blanket. Gotta get cozy. Let's get cozy and talk about books. So I've read 27 books so far this year, which is a crap ton of books for me personally. This is already the most amount of books that I've read in a given year. I kind of started my whole reading journey about a couple of years ago, but this year I just kicked it up a notch, and it has been my favorite form of self-care and a therapy in a sense, just to get lost in another world, escape from my own, and it's just such a huge relief for like my anxiety and stress. So I wouldn't change finding this passion for literally anything. But I thought that this video would be really fun to film. I know that all of my subscribers are really into my book content that I typically show in my vlogs, but I was like, you know what? Let's make a dedicated video just on books. That way it makes it really easy to like refer to some of these books that I'm going to be talking about. So my favorite genres are romance, fantasy, and romantasy. So if those are genres that you are not into, you're not going to enjoy this video. But let's just go ahead and get on into it. If this is the first video of mine that you have stumbled across, hi, my name is Carissa. Welcome. I typically post tons of vlogs and hauls, styling, fashion content, and also lifestyle content, plus now book content. So if you like the vibe around here, definitely subscribe so you don't miss out on more videos that I typically upload every Tuesday and Friday. So I think I'm gonna go in like a semi-chronological order here. What would the beginning of this year have been if you weren't reading ACOTAR? I feel like that's when it was at the height of popularity, although it's still obviously a very popular series. So I read the final 4 books throughout January of this year. The first one, A Court of Thorn and Roses, I read in December. This was honestly my first true introduction to fantasy, and it did not disappoint. I think that if you are looking for a way to get into fantasy, this is a good start, but even if you are a seasoned fantasy reader, you would still enjoy this a ton. I think what was so wild about this series is the fact that the first book is unlike the rest of the series. It's like you think you know what you're getting into based off of the characters that it's introducing, but then it just completely turns on its head when you get into the second book, which is A Court of Mist and Fury. This single book is hands down, I think, one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and in this entire series, this remains my favorite book. This one is absolutely a 5-star read, and on a spicy scale, I would say it's probably like a 3 if I'm remembering correctly. I absolutely devoured this world, and I just love the way that Sarah J. Maas describes everything around, like the character. It really helps to picture where you are, and I just want to live there. I want to live in Valeris and just get lost there. Throughout the whole series, there's obviously lots of world building. They're slowly introducing more of the world around them, more characters, more events are unfolding, and the love story just keeps on developing, and so many like little pieces fall together towards the end of this entire series, and it just completely had a hold of my heart. I had a major book hangover after finishing this series. With that being said though, I would say that besides like this book, this is I think my only 5-star book, maybe the last one as well, but these books are kind of an investment, right? They're very lengthy, and I felt a lot of the times that there was like a lot of filler and a lot of downtime, if you will, kind of just like preparing for some wars. The context was nice, but in the end it just felt like every single one of these books, the last 200 pages or 150 pages was like very rushed, so I would have preferred to have like more balance personally. Also should mention that the first 3 books follow Feyre, the main character, and then this one is kind of like a little Christmas episode. It's a novella and ends up changing to a multiple POV. Lots more context and background stories to each of the characters. It was a fun, quick read. I had the books out of order. And for the last one, A Court of Silver Flames, this one is from Feyre's sister's point of view, Nesta. I thought that this was going to be the one I was like looking forward to the least, but this one is up there with A Court of Mist and Fury. This series is unfinished. I am completely looking forward to the next one. And then the next 2 books I ended up reading was finishing out this series finally from Elise Silver. There was 5 books in total, and I just had these last 2 left. They take place from this small town called Chestnut Springs. It's based up in Canada. Kind of like country vibes, and depending on which book you read, it kind of has like cowboy vibes as well. Super fun. These are romance books, and I would say that the spiciness of them is like a good 4 adore. I devoured this series. I think it is so incredibly good. All the characters are connected and mentioned like in each of the books throughout the entire series. I would say that some of them are standalones, but definitely still read them in order because I think that there's a few spoilers in some of the books if you don't read it in order. Reckless was kind of fun because the guy in here is a bull rider and the woman is a doctor. How guarded she is just spoke to me, and like how she's been done dirty by her previous fiance. They are such a great balance for one another. Complete soulmates. Oh, so good. And then the series wrapped up with Hopeless. Oh, this one, so incredibly good. The guy in here is a military hero. And then you have this shy girl. And then it's just so much fun because they like have this age gap between them and they make this bed and everything was just so well paced and I ate up every single second of this. I think every single book in this series I rated 5 stars and I stand by that. I'm looking at my Goodreads right now to like remind myself, trying to think like which one of the series was my favorite because I know you're gonna ask me. I would probably have to give it to Powerless, which is the 3rd one, or this one, because this one, whoo, ate it up. And then I had to dive back into fantasy. I was ready. I was over my book hangover and I decided to go into the 4th Wing series. So I read 4th Wing and then the 2nd one, Iron Flame. There is a 3rd one coming out in January for which I've already pre-ordered. I'm so looking forward to it. Starting with 4th Wing, hands down a 5-star read. I think the spicy level on this is about like a 4. It could get pretty spicy, like maybe a 3.5. It might be one of my favorite fantasy reads I've ever read. It was all consuming. Even when I wasn't reading it, I wanted to read it. I was always thinking about it. I was trying to fit in any sliver of a minute to like read this book, and I loved the way that it was paced. So much action, had me just like speed reading through this entire book practically. All of the spicy scenes I just devoured. They live rent-free in my head. Xaden, the guy in here, he is everything, but it was so much fun. It kind of reminded me of like Harry Potter and Hogwarts, like a school, like a boarding school, but centered around dragons and riders, and obviously just more X-rated version. And then I immediately dived into Iron Flame immediately after. I had to. This one left me very unwell. It does end on a cliffhanger, which sucks because like I said, the next book isn't coming out until January. While I did rate it 5 stars, I have a few hiccups with this one in particular. Xaden in particular really annoyed me in this one and his interactions with Violet, the other main character. And then the pace of this one, it was a little bit slower than the first. That's clearly building and there's a lot to come. So there's that, but then there's also like more world building and you definitely like learn and pick up a bunch of stuff. There's a ton of surprises sprinkled throughout here. So I still absolutely love it, but I do think that the first one is better. And then I saw that Rebecca Yarros, the same author as 4th Wing, ended up having just like a romance book. And I was like, all right, sign me up. Let's see how this one is. I ended up rating this one 4 stars, but now like in hindsight, maybe it would have been like 3.5 now that I've had more time to think about it. So this one actually has 2 alternating timelines, one in the past from one person's point of view and then one in the present from like another person's point of view. Very interesting and fascinating read. Definitely a lot of surprises, especially when you get towards the end. Wow. The storyline that takes place in the past, I felt like I was more drawn to that one and their love just seems so pure. I felt like the storyline in the present just needed a little bit more development. I wasn't like entirely connected. And I don't know why I don't remember like a ton of spice in this book. So it might be like a 2 or a 3 for this one in particular, but I think it's a good read overall. I was finally ready to tackle Throne of Glass from Sarah J. Maas. This took me months to read. This series is comprised of 8 books here and it is a completed series. The way that I look at this one is that this one just seemed more advanced, more developed than A Court of Thorn and Roses. Like this seemed like a big sister version of Court of Thorn of Roses. This entire world is so captivating, so complex, so much development. You think you know, but then there's more, you know? Keeps you wanting more. Oh, completely sucked into this world. Let's chat chat about specifics about like how I read this book. Assassin's Blade, there's a few points in which you can read this one in particular. You can read this first, you can read the second, you can read this a third. I wouldn't go beyond that. But the reason why you can kind of like move this book around is because this one actually takes place before all of the other books. So how people kind of describe it, it depends on like the impact that you want with the first few books. So like I said, I read it third. Nothing necessarily was like a shock to me. It just provided like more background into like the main character. And the way that I see this as well is it's split into like a few novellas inside of it, like a few different stories. Lots of fun, but it wasn't groundbreaking. I didn't necessarily love being pulled out of the main storyline, but at the end of the day, I don't think it would have changed where I read it because I kind of liked going into the first two books a little lost and like piecing things together myself. It was so much more fun that way. And also like when I started this series, I had no idea what I was like getting into, right? Like Throne of Glass, it seems like competition based. I was like, okay, cool. I have this assassin who is such a badass, so crafty, so clever. I feel like I even remember at one point in this book, I was like, how the hell are they gonna drag this out for 8 books, you know? But it really takes a turn for the better. And what ends up happening in this book bleeds into the second book. I am not going to reveal any spoilers, so I'm going to keep it very surface level. So it bleeds into Crown of Midnight, and then by the end of Crown of Midnight, there's like a huge shock, and you're like, wait, what? And then that's when it kind of sucked to be pulled away and read Assassin's Blade, but then it was nice to get like more background into her before then officially diving in to like the full main storyline, which I would say are the rest of these books. When it comes to Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn, these two books take place at the exact same time, so I ended up doing a tandem read. I had a tandem read guide. I can link that down below for you guys, but I highly recommend doing the tandem read. I couldn't imagine doing it in any other way, and this was the most fun I've ever had with reading, and these were two of like my favorite books. You're gonna make me choose. I know it. You're gonna make me choose a favorite, and I don't know if I can do it. Each holds like kind of a special place in my heart, honestly. Like Heir of Fire, going through the struggles, trying to find yourself, find your purpose. But then, you know, we're getting places when we move into Queen of Shadows, and then lots of building and setting the stage for the final book and Empire of Storms. Tower of Dawn, I really enjoyed this one because it pulled from the main character and focused on two completely separate people in this book. Obviously, those two characters were mentioned in the other ones, but it was kind of nice. And I just completely devoured like the romance in this one in particular. Speaking of romance, I would say like the first 3 books, there's really like no spiciness to them. And if you're looking for spice and like heavy romance in the series, you get some, you don't get a ton. Like you definitely get more from A Court of Thorn and Roses. I would probably say that this is around like a 2, maybe a 3, like at best. You're definitely satisfied. I will give you that. And then the last book, you guys, Kingdom of Ash, it just completely destroyed me. I went through all of the emotions, the full roller coaster of emotions. This series will forever hold a special place in my heart, and you should absolutely read it if you haven't already. Needless to say, after reading Throne of Glass, I was like, I need a major break from fantasy, so I dived headfirst into so many romance books. Let's discuss. So I ended up reading Unravel Me, which is the 3rd book in this Playing for Keeps series from Becca Mack. There's actually a 4th one, and there may even be a 5th on the way, if I'm not mistaken. This one is exactly what I needed in the moment. I don't know if this is necessarily like my favorite one from the entire series, but if you're looking for like a good, happy-go-lucky romance book, not a ton of depth and kind of like just like a cutesy read, I mean, this is for you. The entire series is centered around hockey players, and they live in Vancouver, Canada. These books are spicy. I would say that they're like a 4, and I completely eat them up every single time, honestly. Quick reads, and you cannot go wrong. I read When I Fall from Jade Daniels next, and this one is like a little bit more spicy than the last, and like just like more dirty. This is a small town romance. It takes place in like Alabama. I love small town romances, and I think it's because I don't live in a small town. I just, something about it, like the quaintness of it, I am obsessed with. The banter between the two main characters in this book is just so unmatched, and give me kind of like a bad boy, like one that kind of doesn't want to settle down but then gets convinced otherwise like any minute of the day, and I will love it, you know? So this one was a good one. And then we took it up a notch. We got into the ultimate romance, and I went into a dark romance. I read The Ritual. I don't know what it says about me for the fact that I completely loved this book. I actually had a little bit of a book hangover after reading this book. For sure, the spicy level on this is a 5. I would even throw out, like, there's a disclaimer in this that this is just not for everyone. Intense things that happens in here. Definitely some trigger warnings in this one. So this is a 2-person point of view. This book, and I think like this entire series, I think they're all like kind of like related to one another, is just so interesting and fascinating. It's like these lords, and you're kind of like born into being a lord, and you have like this purpose in your life that you have to fulfill, and you attend this university to like complete the full initiation. You graduate, you become a lord, but then you have to go through things to like prove yourself. And then there's like this pairing with every future lord is to have a chosen one, which is a girl. They have to vow to you and do like everything you say. It's fascinating, but I loved the characters. Riot is the guy, and he is daddy. Oh my god. And then on the flip side, there is the point of view from Blake as well. She's the female in the book, and I love her. She's like a complete ride or die type of chick. I love how it develops, surprisingly, and it literally had me questioning everything about myself. I'm absolutely going to be reading the rest of the books in this series. And then I took up the Serpent and the Wings of Night series. This is a fantasy read, romantasy, if you will, and you see how I like to like switch back and forth between the two, because I like to have some separation and let like one fantasy be its own before like moving on to the next. So this series is based on like duets. The way that she's developed the rest of the books to come is kind of like based on houses. So this follows vampires, and specifically one segment of a house of vampires, which is the House of Night. And then there's going to be 4 more books to cover the 2 other houses. Who knows what else is to come after that. This entire series I rated 5 stars. I think it is like a 3.5 on the spicy scale. If you're looking for a fantasy that doesn't have anything to do with fae, I feel like I needed a break from fae, this is for you. You have humans, you have vampires, and this specific vampires in this house have wings. Different types of vampires with 2 different sets of wings. The first one is again kind of like competition based and kind of like enemies to lovers in a sense. This series completely sucked me in from the moment I started reading, and I just loved every single page of this book. So because of the competition base that I mentioned that's in this book, it kind of felt like the first book of Throne of Glass, because that one was kind of competition based as well. And then it led into the second book, the duet, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. This one is just like wrapping up this specific story. You have to go through a little bit in this book, right? There's a little bit of a down, there's a little bit of a struggle, a little bit of redemption, but completely ate it up. I love the 2 main characters. Also should mention this one is just from Aurea's point of view, and then this one turns into like a multiple point of view, which was a nice change. And then I noticed that they had kind of like a 1.5 sort of book that they threw into this specific duet, which is The 6 Scorched Roses. It does take 2 characters that are featured in The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King and kind of gives them their own story. This is a little novella. This is less than a day read. It's not even 200 pages, and is still in the same world of like the House of Night that takes place literally in between these 2 books. So you could read it just like this if you want to kind of like split them up. I did not know that I was going to love this book as much as I did. This is one of those books that just kind of like had me in my mind, in my thoughts a bit after reading it. It's definitely holding a piece of my heart. It's so good, and I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the books that are to come in the series. And then the last of the books that I've read so far this season that I just wrapped up is the King of Wrath series. This is the same author that wrote Twisted Love series. Spicy, spicy, spicy. These are definitely like a spice level 4. These are some damn good romance books. I stand behind that. All of them I gave 5 stars. stars, except for King of Pride. I ended up giving 4 stars on that one. This is like the riches, the elites, the billionaires, New York proper, if you will, with a little bit of violence and danger in some of them, not all of them, each one a little bit different. Like King of Wrath, it was kind of like an arranged marriage romance. So good. King of Pride, in my mind, like 2 complete opposites attracting, sort of a romance. King of Greed, my first book that I've ever read like this, but it is a romance about like a divorced couple that finds their way back to one another. I completely soaked this one up. I think that this one is my favorite one. And then King of Sloth actually might be one of my favorites too. Whenever there is just like a stubborn female, I love it. And just watching the guy like break down her defenses, break down her walls, and is just trying to melt her heart and is just ride or die for her, I soak them up. So that one is really, really good in that regard as well. So I just put some books on my lap to try to give you like my ultimate favorites from all of this, and I'll quickly go through it. So King of Sloth and King of Greed, 2 of my favorite books from this year. Because it still has a strong grip hold on me, I have to say The Ritual. I have to read it if it's your vibe. For Throne of Glass series, I think my favorite book, I'm having a hard time remembering, was Queen of Shadows, but for sure I really loved Tower of Dawn. The first Fourth Wing book, hands down. This is a must read, you guys. And then when it came to A Court of Thorn and Roses, oof. How can you not, right? This is the favorites, but I also really, really enjoyed this one as well. And I have all 3 of these books on my lap because I'm having a hard time deciding. These 2 were very even for me, but maybe I would say like the second is slightly more. This entire series you have to read, but above all else, this little novella, holy shit, it's just unbelievably good. Honestly, you might even be able to read this without even reading the other 2 books. It is a complete standalone and it's just so incredibly good. I really like gauge this by which books still just have a piece of my heart and some of those books that you kind of like drift to and think about randomly on some days, and those are the books that are constantly in my thoughts. I really hope that you guys enjoy this video. It's not like my standard content that I typically do, but again, I thought it would be a lot of fun to dedicate a video just solely talking about books for you all. You have to let me know what books you recommend. Which ones are your favorite from this year? Which ones should I check out? Let me know, of course, if this is something that you want to see me continue to do. But I love you guys. I love you guys so very much. And I'll see you in a couple days for my next one. Bye.